There's a place on Earth that breaks almost every rule you think you understand about geography. A place sitting directly on the equator, yet covered in glaciers. A place where one of humanity's closest relatives still survives in a forest older than civilization itself. A place where a river begins a journey that will shape entire nations thousands of miles away. And somehow, most people never think about it. Most people couldn't find it on a map. Yet what exists here rivals anything you'll find in the Amazon, the Alps, or the Serengeti. Because hidden in the heart of East Africa is a country that seems to contain an entire continent inside a single border. Snow-covered mountains, ancient rainforests, volcanic lakes, endless savannas, rare wildlife, and stories that feel almost impossible. But what makes Uganda extraordinary isn't any one of these things. It's that all of them exist together in one place. And by the end of this documentary, you'll understand why some travelers leave believing this isn't just one of Africa's most beautiful countries, it's one of the most remarkable places on Earth. But before we meet the gorillas, before we climb into the clouds above the equator, before we follow the Nile to where it begins, there's something you need to understand. Uganda wasn't supposed to survive. And yet, somehow, it did. When most people imagine Africa, they imagine vast distances, countries so large that landscapes change over days of travel. Uganda does the opposite. It compresses everything. The country is smaller than Oregon. Yet, inside that relatively small space, exists a level of ecological diversity that seems almost unfair. Within a single day, you can leave tropical rainforest, drive through open savanna, cross volcanic crater fields, stand beside one of the world's largest lakes, and end the evening looking towards snow-covered mountains. The scale shouldn't work, but somehow it does. And it starts with location. Uganda sits almost exactly where East Africa's greatest forces collide. To the west, the immense Congo Basin. To the south, the waters of Lake Victoria. To the east, the elevated highlands of Kenya. To the north, the dry savannas stretching toward the Nile Valley. Each pushes and pulls on Uganda's climate. Each leaves its mark. The result is a landscape that feels less like one country and more like several worlds stitched together. And nowhere is that more obvious than in the southwest, because hidden among steep mountains near the borders of Rwanda and Congo lies one of the oldest forests on Earth. A place so dense, so mysterious, that even its name sounds like a warning. Bwindi, the impenetrable forest. Imagine entering a forest where sunlight struggles to reach the ground, where visibility shrinks to only a few meters, where vines twist through ancient trees, where every sound feels amplified, a branch snapping, leaves moving, a distant call echoing through the darkness. For centuries, people avoided places like this because forests like Bwindi feel alive, not metaphorically, literally. The air moves differently. The silence feels different. Even time feels different. And in many ways, it is. Because Bwindi is not just old, it's ancient. Scientists believe this forest survived climatic shifts that wiped out vast portions of Africa's rainforest thousands of years ago. While ecosystems disappeared, Bwindi endured. While species vanished elsewhere, many found refuge here. And because of that survival, something extraordinary happened. Life accumulated, generation after generation, century after century, until this relatively small patch of forest became one of the most biologically diverse places on the continent. More than 400 plant species, hundreds of bird species, dozens of mammals, countless insects still being discovered. But none of those are the reason people travel across the world to come here. They're here for something else, something watching from inside the trees. And when you finally see it, the experience is not what most people expect. It isn't dramatic. It isn't frightening. It's something much stranger. Because for a brief moment, you stop feeling like the observer and start feeling observed. Trackers move slowly through the forest, sometimes for hours, sometimes longer, following clues almost invisible to untrained eyes. A bent branch, a footprint, fresh vegetation, a distant sound. Eventually, the forest begins to change. The signs become more frequent. The trackers slow down. Voices disappear. Everyone suddenly knows they're close. And then you see them. Not in a zoo, not through glass, not on a screen. A family of mountain gorillas living exactly as they have for generations, eating, resting, playing, watching. The first surprise is their size, the second is their gentleness. Young gorillas wrestle like children. Mothers care for infants with astonishing tenderness. Families move together with a familiarity that feels deeply recognizable. And then there's the silverback, the leader, massive, powerful, completely aware of everything happening around him. When a mature silverback looks directly at you, the experience can be unsettling. Not because he seems aggressive, but because he seems familiar. His eyes, his expressions, his attention. The distance between human and gorilla suddenly feels much smaller than you expected. And scientifically, that's because it is. Mountain gorillas share roughly 98% of their DNA with us. But numbers don't prepare you for the reality. Seeing them in person feels less like observing wildlife and more like meeting distant relatives. But here's the part most people never hear. A few decades ago, encounters like this were on the verge of disappearing forever. By the late 20th century, mountain gorillas faced enormous pressures: habitat loss, poaching, political instability, human encroachment. Their numbers collapsed. Most conservationists feared extinction was no longer a question of if, only when. The outlook was bleak. And yet, today, mountain gorillas remain one of the rare conservation success stories on Earth. Not because the danger vanished, but because thousands of people refused to let them disappear. Rangers, scientists, local communities, entire generations committed to protecting something they could easily have lost. The result is remarkable. The species recovered. Slowly, painfully, but undeniably. And that recovery transformed Uganda into one of the most important wildlife conservation stories in the world. Which leads to an even bigger surprise. Because as extraordinary as Bwindi is, it isn't Uganda's greatest geographical mystery. For that, we need to travel west, to mountains that ancient civilizations believed were mythical. Mountains hidden inside clouds, mountains capped with glaciers, on the equator. And what waits there feels even less believable than the gorillas. Imagine standing on the equator, the same latitude as the Congo rainforest, the same latitude as some of the hottest regions on Earth. Now imagine looking up and seeing glaciers. Not a patch of snow, not seasonal ice, glaciers, permanent ice fields hanging above the clouds. It feels wrong, like nature made a mistake. And for centuries many people believed exactly that. Because long before satellites, long before aerial photography, stories spread across the ancient world about mysterious mountains deep inside Africa. Mountains covered in snow, mountains feeding a river that sustained entire civilizations. Most assumed they were myths, legends invented to explain the Nile. Yet hidden along Uganda's western frontier, those mountains were real all along. The Rwenzori Mountains, the mountains of the moon. And the strangest thing about them is that even when you're standing beside them, you often can't see them. The Rwenzori do not announce themselves, they hide. Clouds wrap around them for days, sometimes weeks. Travelers arrive expecting towering peaks and see nothing but mist. Then, suddenly, the clouds open. For a few seconds, maybe a few minutes, and an entirely different world appears. Jagged summits, frozen ridges, ancient ice. Then the clouds close again, as if the mountain never wanted to be seen. The effect feels almost supernatural. But the real story is even more remarkable. Unlike Kilimanjaro or Mount Kenya, the Rwenzori were not built by volcanoes. These mountains were pushed upward by immense tectonic forces over millions of years. The Earth literally folded itself skyward, creating one of Africa's most unusual landscapes. And as you climb higher, the world begins to change. First comes rainforest, dense, green, humid. Then bamboo forests. Then giant heather. Then something unexpected. An alien kingdom. Gigantic plants rise from the mist. Strange shapes covered in frost. Towering lobelias, massive groundsels. Plants that seem designed for another planet. Some grow higher than houses. Others appear frozen in time. Scientists have compared these slopes to living evolutionary laboratories. Entire species exist here and nowhere else on Earth. Every step upward feels like traveling between worlds. But eventually you reach the highest zone, the ice. And that's where the story becomes bittersweet. Because the glaciers are disappearing fast. Ice that survived tens of thousands of years is vanishing within a human lifetime. The glaciers that once defined these mountains have already lost most of their mass. Many scientists believe future generations may never see them at all. Imagine that, a mountain range known for its impossible equatorial glaciers without glaciers. The thought feels wrong, and perhaps that's why standing here feels so emotional. You're witnessing something ancient, something beautiful, and something fragile, all at the same time. The Bakonzo people who live along these slopes have always understood something outsiders often miss. The mountains are not scenery, they are life. The water, the weather, the rivers, the ecosystems below, everything begins here. And as the clouds drift across the peaks, you begin to understand why ancient civilizations imagined these mountains feeding the world. Because in many ways, they still do. But the rivers born here are heading somewhere else, toward a landscape completely different, a place where lions sleep in trees, hippos crowd entire waterways, and volcanic explosions created hundreds of hidden lakes. Welcome to Western Uganda's wild kingdom. Most wildlife documentaries teach us certain rules. Elephants live on the ground, hippos stay in rivers, lions hunt across grasslands. Simple, predictable, easy to understand. Until Uganda breaks the rules again. Because in this national park, lions climb trees. Not occasionally, not accidentally, regularly. And nobody knows exactly why. The first time you see it, your brain rejects the image. A full-grown lion, 30 feet above the ground, sleeping on a branch, as if gravity simply doesn't apply here. In the Ishasha sector of Queen Elizabeth National Park, entire prides spend hours resting in giant fig trees. Some stretch across branches, others balance impassably high above the savannah. Generations have repeated the behavior. Parents, offspring, entire family lines. Yet scientists still debate the reason. Heat avoidance, insects, better visibility, maybe all three, maybe none. The mystery remains, and somehow that's part of the magic. Because this park is full of mysteries. The landscape feels almost impossible. Open savanna suddenly becomes forest. Forests give way to wetlands. Wetlands lead into crater fields, then lakes, then volcanic ridges, then endless grasslands again. Each ecosystem supports different life, which is why the biodiversity here feels overwhelming. Elephants, buffalo, leopards, hyenas, antelope, chimpanzees, hundreds of bird species, thousands of smaller creatures hidden between them. But nothing prepares you for the Kazinga Channel. Imagine one of the busiest wildlife highways on Earth. Now fill it with hippos, thousands of them. The Kazinga Channel connects two major lakes, and every day, animals arrive here. Buffalo gather by the hundreds. Elephants march to the shoreline. Crocodiles wait motionless in the shallows. Birds fill the air. Meanwhile, the water itself seems alive. Every few seconds, another hippo surfaces. Another splash, another grunt, another enormous head emerging from the water. The density is staggering. At times it feels less like a river and more like a living city. Then there are the crater lakes, more than 70 scattered across the landscape, each formed by ancient volcanic violence, each possessing its own personality. Some glow deep blue, others emerald green, others reflect copper and gold at sunset. From the air they look like mirrors dropped from the sky, hidden jewels embedded across the earth. And together they create one of the most visually spectacular landscapes anywhere in Africa. This is what makes Queen Elizabeth National Park extraordinary. Not one attraction, not one animal, but the accumulation. The feeling that every hour reveals something completely different. Yet even this is not the country's most powerful natural spectacle. For that, we must follow a river north, a river that suddenly encounters something so violent, so overwhelming, that it changes character forever. The Nile, and the place where it explodes. You hear it long before you see it, a distant roar, low at first, then growing and growing and growing until conversation becomes impossible. The sound fills the air, vibrates through the ground, and suddenly you realize something remarkable. You're hearing a river lose an argument. The Nile arrives wide, confident, powerful. Then the landscape gives it only one choice: squeeze through a gap barely wider than a small room. Imagine taking one of the world's great rivers and forcing it through a crack in the rock. That's Murchison Falls. Millions of gallons of water charging forward, then suddenly compressed. The pressure becomes unimaginable. The result is chaos. White water, spray, mist, thunder. The entire river appears to explode. Standing beside it feels less like visiting a waterfall and more like witnessing a collision between two natural forces. Water refusing to stop, rock refusing to move, neither willing to surrender. The Nile has traveled far before reaching this point, fed by rains, lakes, streams, entire watersheds. All of that momentum arrives here, and all of it must pass through a narrow opening. The violence is spectacular, but what happens afterward is even stranger. The river calms, almost immediately. The chaos disappears. The Nile widens, breathes, continues north as though nothing happened. And along this calmer stretch, one of Uganda's greatest wildlife theatres begins. The riverbanks attract everything. Elephants, crocodiles, hippos, giraffes, antelope, birds of every imaginable shape and colour. The Nile becomes a corridor of life, a gathering place, a meeting point, the kind of ecosystem that feels timeless. Boats drift through waters crowded with wildlife. Fish eagles patrol overhead. Hippos surface beside the hull. Crocodiles lie motionless in the sun. Farther inland, Rothschild's giraffes move across golden grasslands. One of the rarest giraffe subspecies on Earth. Elegant, silent, ancient. The entire landscape feels cinematic. Every turn reveals another scene. Every scene feels impossible to improve upon. Then somehow, it does. As the sun begins to set, the Nile turns gold. The wildlife slows, shadows stretch across the riverbanks, and the roar of the falls becomes distant once more. What remains is perspective, because rivers have always shaped civilizations. Empires rose because of them, trade followed them, people fought over them, worshipped them, depended on them. And here in Uganda, the Nile still feels wild, still feels powerful, still feels larger than human history. But our story is about to change, because to understand modern Uganda, we must leave the wildlife behind and step into a different landscape. A landscape shaped not by rivers or mountains, but by people. Kingdoms, empires, and decisions whose consequences still echo today. long before Uganda existed, people were building kingdoms here. Not villages, not scattered tribes, kingdoms. Organized societies with rulers, courts, trade networks, armies, and traditions that stretched back centuries. This is one of the biggest misconceptions outsiders have about Africa. The idea that history began when Europeans arrived. In Uganda, that couldn't be further from the truth. Because when the first European explorers entered this region, they didn't discover civilization. They discovered civilizations, plural. Across the fertile lands surrounding Lake Victoria, powerful kingdoms had already emerged. Uganda, Bunyoro, Toro, Busoga, and Kole. Each with its own identity, its own leadership, its own story. Among them, Uganda became one of the most influential. Its rulers governed from royal courts. Its chiefs administered vast territories. Its political structure was sophisticated enough that early visitors were often surprised by what they encountered. These were societies with systems, rules, institutions, history, and perhaps more importantly, a strong sense of who they were. Which is why the arrival of outside powers would reshape the region so dramatically. By the late 19th century, European empires were racing to divide Africa among themselves. Borders were drawn, territories claimed, maps changed, and, eventually, Uganda became part of the British protectorate system. On paper, it looked orderly. In reality, it was complicated. The borders grouped together dozens of peoples with different histories, languages, and loyalties. Communities that had developed separately for centuries suddenly found themselves inside a single political unit. The arrangement worked until it didn't, because eventually colonial rule would end and a new question would emerge. What exactly was Uganda? A collection of kingdoms? A modern nation? Something in between? The answer would prove far more difficult than anyone expected. When Uganda gained independence in 1962, the mood was hopeful. Flags rose, crowds celebrated, a new future seemed possible. But building a nation is very different from declaring one. The hardest chapter was still ahead. Every country has moments that define it, moments that shape how the world sees it. For Uganda, these moments arrived fast, and they arrived painfully. Because the country that had celebrated independence with optimism soon became known for something entirely different: fear. The 1970s were among the most difficult years in Uganda's modern history. Political instability deepened, institutions weakened, violence spread, and the country became internationally known for all the wrong reasons. For many people outside Africa, Uganda's image froze in that era. News headlines, political turmoil, economic collapse, stories of suffering. The beauty of the country disappeared behind the headlines, and that's the tragedy. Because while those events were real, they never told the whole story. They became the only story many outsiders knew. Yet even during those difficult years, life continued. Families raised children. Communities preserved traditions. Farmers worked the land. People adapted. Because that's what people do. History often focuses on leaders and conflicts, but countries survive because ordinary people keep going. And Uganda kept going. The decades that followed were far from simple. Political struggles continued. Different regions experienced different realities. Some areas stabilized quickly, others endured years of insecurity. The North in particular would face enormous challenges. Entire communities were displaced, families were separated, generations grew up under conditions they never chose. For many Ugandans, survival became a daily achievement. Yet, somehow, the country never broke. Imagine rebuilding your future while still carrying the weight of your past. That's modern Uganda. Over time, schools reopened, businesses returned, infrastructure expanded, tourism recovered, wildlife populations rebounded, cities grew, roads improved, investments arrived. The headlines gradually changed. But something interesting happened. The world never fully noticed. Many people still picture Uganda through images from decades ago. A country frozen in old news reports. A place defined by its worst moments, not its present reality. And that disconnect remains one of Uganda's greatest paradoxes. Because while much of the world was looking elsewhere, Uganda was quietly rebuilding itself. Not perfectly, not without challenges, but steadily, patiently, determinedly. And nowhere is that contrast more visible than in Kampala, a city racing toward the future, while carrying centuries of history on its shoulders. But before we reach the capital, there's one final region we need to visit. A place unlike anywhere else in the country. A place where life still moves to a rhythm older than modern borders. Karamoja. Most visitors never come here. The roads are longer, the distances feel larger, the landscapes become harsher. And suddenly, Uganda begins to look completely different. The forests disappear, the lakes fade away, the air grows drier, the horizon expands. Welcome to Karamoja. If Bwindi feels hidden, Karamoja feels forgotten. In Uganda's far northeast lies one of the country's most distinctive regions. A land of wide-open plains, isolated mountains, seasonal rivers, and some of East Africa's oldest living traditions. This is the homeland of the Karamojang people, a pastoral culture whose relationship with cattle shapes nearly every aspect of life. For outsiders, the connection can be difficult to understand. Cattle here are not simply livestock. They are wealth, identity, status, memory, family history. Entire generations measure success through their herds. Entire communities organize themselves around seasonal movement of grazing patterns. Life follows the rhythm of the land, not the clock. Villages known as manyatas dot the landscape. Circular communities surrounded by protective fences, homes built from local materials, traditions passed directly from one generation to the next. Children learn stories that existed long before modern Uganda. Elders preserve knowledge accumulated across centuries. And despite enormous changes elsewhere, many of those traditions remain remarkably intact. But Karamoja is not simply a story about the past. It's increasingly becoming a story about the future, because beneath these plains lies something valuable. Minerals, resources, economic opportunity. The same land that sustains traditional life is attracting growing outside interest. Investors see potential. Communities see ancestral land. Governments see development. And those visions don't always align. The result is one of the most fascinating transitions occurring anywhere in Uganda today. Ancient lifestyles meeting modern economics. Tradition meeting globalization. The old world meeting the new. Yet, despite these changes, Karamoja retains something increasingly rare: authenticity. Not because it's untouched, no place is, but because life here still feels rooted, connected, grounded in something deeper than trends or tourism. And that makes it unforgettable. Standing on these plains at sunset, watching cattle move across the horizon, watching distant mountains turn gold, you realize something important. Uganda isn't one story, it's many stories. Rainforests, glaciers, savannas, kingdoms, cities, pastoral cultures, each revealing a different version of the same country. And somehow, all of them fit together. But there is still one story we haven't told, the biggest one. The reason Uganda appears on maps around the world. The reason explorers crossed continents searching for answers. The reason entire civilizations depended on water flowing north. Because, in the eastern part of the country, a river begins. Not just any river. The Nile. And the place where it starts may be the most important location in Uganda. Some places are important because of what happened there. Others are important because of what exists there. Jinja is important because of what leaves. A river, a single ribbon of water, one that will travel thousands of kilometers across a continent, one that will sustain millions of lives, one that helped shape human civilization itself. And it begins here. The strange thing about the source of the Nile is how ordinary it looks. After everything you've heard about the Nile, the ancient kingdoms, the explorers, the empires, the wars fought over its waters, you expect something dramatic. A giant waterfall, a sacred canyon, a spectacular spring bursting from the earth. Instead, you find calm water, gentle movement, a quiet transition where Lake Victoria slowly becomes a river. And perhaps that's what makes it so powerful. Because the greatest journeys rarely look extraordinary at the beginning. Standing at Jinja feels different once you realize where this water is going. North through Uganda, into South Sudan, across Sudan, into Egypt, eventually reaching the Mediterranean Sea. Along the way, it will nourish cities, farms, ecosystems, and entire populations. It will become one of the most politically significant rivers on Earth. Yet here, it feels peaceful, almost humble. For centuries, explorers searched desperately for this place. The source of the Nile became one of geography's greatest mysteries. Maps were drawn, theories proposed, expeditions launched. Some failed, some disappeared. Others returned convinced they had found the answer. But the truth proved more complicated, because rivers don't begin at a single point. They're systems, networks, connections. The Nile begins long before Jinja, and yet Jinja remains the symbolic birthplace, the moment where the water unmistakably begins its journey north. Imagine following a drop of water from here all the way to the Mediterranean. 6,600 kilometers, 4 countries, thousands of years of history, one river. Today, Jinja has become something entirely different from the mysterious destination explorers once imagined. Adventure seekers come here from around the world. The Nile is still young here, still energetic, still wild. Whitewater rapids crash through sections of the river. Kayakers test themselves against powerful currents. Rafting boats disappear into walls of spray. The world's longest river begins not with silence, but with excitement, life, motion, energy. As the sun rises over the water, something becomes clear. The Nile is more than a river. It's a connection, a thread linking mountains, forests, lakes, countries, and civilizations. And Uganda sits at the very beginning of that thread. But there is one final place we need to visit, a place where all of Uganda's stories meet. The capital, the heart, the city that contains centuries. Kampala. If Uganda's wilderness reveals its past, Kampala reveals its future. At first glance, Kampala feels chaotic. Then you realize it's not chaos at all. It's rhythm. The city rises across a series of hills. Traffic flows like rivers. Motorcycles weave through streets with astonishing precision. Markets spill into sidewalks. Construction cranes fill the skyline. Everywhere you look, something is being built. Something is moving. Something is growing. Nearly every visitor notices the same thing: energy. Not the energy of tourism, not the energy of spectacle, the energy of daily life. The feeling that millions of people are actively shaping their future at the same time. Yet, beneath the modern city, older layers remain. Royal traditions continue. Ancient kingdoms still influence culture. Historic sites stand beside new developments. Mosques, churches, markets, universities, government buildings, traditional institutions, modern businesses, all existing together. One of the most remarkable examples is the Kasubi tombs, a site unlike almost anything else in Africa, constructed using traditional materials and techniques, a place where history remains alive rather than preserved behind glass. When fire damaged the site years ago, the response was immediate. Communities came together, traditional builders returned, ancient knowledge was used once again. The tombs were rebuilt, not because they were old, but because they still mattered. And perhaps that tells you everything you need to know about Kampala. The city isn't trying to erase its past, it's trying to carry it forward. That's much harder and much more interesting. At sunset, the city transforms. Lights spread across the hills. Music drifts through neighborhoods. Restaurants fill, markets remain active. Motorcycles continue flowing through the streets. The city never truly stops. And from above, Kampala tells a story many outsiders never hear. A story of resilience, growth, adaptation. A country moving forward while refusing to forget where it came from. Because Kampala isn't remarkable despite Uganda's history, it's remarkable because of it. Every challenge, every success, every chapter, they all meet here. And together, they create a city that feels alive in a way few places do. But before we end, there's one final question. After everything we've seen, what exactly is Uganda? At the beginning of this journey, we introduce Uganda as a country that seemed impossible. A place where glaciers exist on the equator, where lions climb trees, where mountain gorillas still survive, where the Nile begins, where ancient kingdoms coexist with modern cities. Now we've seen all of it. And the real surprise isn't that these things exist. It's that they exist together. Because Uganda's greatest wonder isn't any single place. It's the combination. The forests of Bwindi, the glaciers of the Rwenzori, the savannas of Queen Elizabeth National Park, the power of Murchison Falls, the traditions of Karamoja, the waters of the Nile, the hills of Kampala. Individually, any one of these things would be enough to make a country memorable. Together, they create something extraordinary. For decades, much of the world saw Uganda through a narrow lens, a single chapter, a single period, a single narrative. But countries are never one story. They are collections of stories. And Uganda may be one of the best examples on earth. Beauty and hardship, tradition and modernity, wilderness and urban life, history and possibility. Existing side by side, not competing, not contradicting, completing one another. Perhaps that's why travelers who visit Uganda often struggle to describe it afterward, because every description feels incomplete. Focus on the wildlife, and you miss the people. Focus on the history, and you miss the landscapes. Focus on the cities, and you miss the forests. Focus on the forests, and you miss the rivers. No single story is large enough. More than a century ago, Winston Churchill called Uganda the Pearl of Africa. The phrase survived because it was accurate. Not because Uganda is perfect, not because it's easy, but because genuine rarity is difficult to describe. And rare is exactly what this place is. A country where some of Earth's oldest forests still breathe, where mountain gorillas still walk, where glaciers still cling to equatorial peaks, where one of humanity's greatest rivers begins, and where millions of people continue writing the next chapter of a remarkable story. The world talks constantly about places that are famous, places that are crowded, places everyone already knows. Uganda is different. It remains, even now, one of the last places capable of surprising you. And maybe that's its greatest gift. Not showing you something you've never seen before. Showing you that the world still has places capable of making you wonder. The most pristine beauty you've never seen. And perhaps the most extraordinary country the world still overlooks.